I did not tell anyone the truth on my daughter's wedding day. I smiled, pinned a corsage to my own dress, and let the room believe what it wanted. My husband, Daniel Morris, had died months earlier, leaving behind a portfolio of low-country beachfront homes he had built over 2 decades, houses that could take wind and salt straight on. Before he passed, he moved them into a trust with my name at the center, a portfolio valued near $80 million. I chose silence, and that choice would matter. The reception took place in an old Charleston hall, chandeliers, bright floors, polished laughter rising in confident waves. When I found my place card, it led me to table 14, 2 steps from an emergency exit, and half hidden behind a column of white hydrangeas. I sat where I was placed, a little outside the photographs and far from the toasts. From there, I watched my daughter Nora enter, radiant in her gown. The distance was arranged, not accidental, but I kept my hands folded and my face soft. People forget how long a mother practices quiet. I taught first graders for 30 years, letters into words, words into courage, then graded papers in the hush beside a crib. Silence became muscle memory. On that wedding night, it steadied me again. I clapped when others clapped, raised my glass when the room lifted theirs, and said nothing about the trust, the deeds, or the reason Daniel had gripped my hand in his last week and told me plainly, "Do not tell, do not sign." Daniel had named the portfolio the Saltwind Houses. He started with decks and roofs, then entire cottages, then sturdy villas up and down the Carolina coast. In the hallway of my modest 2-story home sits a small safe from his construction days, scarred metal dependable lock. Inside are the documents of our years, recorded deeds, letters, the trust itself. I keep the brass key in my cardigan pocket. Some mornings I close my hand around it the way I once closed my hand around his. A week after the wedding, the doorbell rang at 9:10. On my porch stood Caleb Hart, my brand new son-in-law, pressed shirt, practiced smile, and a man in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Mrs. Morris," Caleb said, voice smooth as glass. "This is Mr. Porter. We thought we'd stop by just to help with a few safety documents now that you're on your own." I set a second teacup on the table out of habit and let the kettle finish its work. Steam rose, simple and honest. The attorney slid a folder across the wood, durable power of attorney bold on the cover clauses fanning out like nets. Caleb rested his fingertips on the edge of the pages as if steadying them. "It's only a formality," he assured, "so nothing ever goes wrong with the houses, the accounts, everything Daniel left." My spoon touched porcelain with a small ring, one of those house sounds you only hear when you're listening. I read the first page, then the second. Noting the breadth, immediate authority, broad financial powers, health decisions as a footnote, I thought of chandeliers and hydrangeas, of how a person can be placed out of frame without a word. I thought of the Saltwind Houses standing against storms that never bothered to ask permission. I did not argue. I did not accuse. I set the spoon down, took my time with the tea, and let quiet do the work. Caleb made a second pass at reassurance. The lawyer cleared his throat as if to keep the rhythm. When they paused for my answer, I closed the folder gently and slid it back an inch. No drama, no scrape, only the soft decision of paper moving on wood. "I'll review this with counsel," I said, even though they had not asked whether I had one. "Leave it here. I'll be in touch." Something in Caleb's smile tightened, then smoothed. He glanced at Mr. Porter. Mr. Porter gathered the pen he had already uncapped. They stood, shook my hand, and stepped into the bright of late morning. The door closed with the small certainty of a latch finding its keep. I washed the 2 cups, dried them on the same towel I'd used for years, then walked to the hallway and touched the safe. The metal was cool. The key was warm in my palm. A mother can choose many languages. That day, I chose the one Daniel had trusted, silence with a spine. This is where my story truly begins. The next morning, I heard the light knock. I know better than any doorbell. 3 taps, a breath, 2 taps. I opened to find June Ellison on the porch, a square baking dish under one arm and the clean readiness of someone who has already decided what to do. She lives 2 doors down, a widow 10 years now, hair like silver thread, cropped close sentences trimmed to what matters. "Skillet cornbread," she said, stepping in without ceremony. And a pair of eyes. Steam rose when she set the pan on the counter, butter pooling at the edges like sunlight around a rooftop. She scanned my kitchen the way a nurse checks vital signs, cupboards closed, kettle on 2 teacups, waiting out of habit. Then she noticed the folder tucked under a placemat, the corner of a page peeking out. She didn't touch. She just lifted the cloth, read the bold print, and let out a breath through her nose. "Durable power of attorney. Who brought this?" "Caleb," I said, "with a lawyer named Porter." "Of course he did." June slid the file back with one finger. Men like that love the word safety when what they need is leverage. I poured tea and cut the cornbread into squares, the knife tapping the cast iron in a steady metronome. We ate the first bites in silence, the room filling with corn and butter and the small rest it gives a person to chew before choosing words. Say it out loud, June said finally. They want me to sign, I answered. They say it's to keep me from trouble. It reads like a key to my life. Keys belong to owners, she said, not visitors. She reached into her cardigan and pulled out a folded index card, the edges softened by pockets and years. On it, in her neat block letters, were 3 short lines. No documents accepted at the door. Drafts 48 hours in advance. All matters through counsel. This is what I call a door rule, she said. You tape it by the hinge where everyone can see it. Then you obey it yourself. It sounds simple. It is simple. It is not easy. She told me a story of the spring after her husband Frank died. A nephew's suddenly attentive phone calls blooming at Sunday supper time, the word protection repeated until it went sweet and thin. He arrived one afternoon with a notary in tow and a bouquet for good measure. June had hesitated, she said, noticed how the notary stepped back to give them a minute, as if manipulation needs space the way bread needs air. I didn't sign, she finished. He didn't call again. Hurts like a pulled tooth at first. Then you notice you can bite clean. I reached into my own cardigan and touched the brass key I carry, cool at the ring, warm at the stem. The safe in the hallway held the deeds, the recorded titles, the trust Daniel had set like a wall around me. June saw my hand and nodded toward the hallway as if greeting an ally. Daniel left you a structure, she said. Now you maintain it. We sat at the table and made a list. Lists, June says, are how paper gains weight and Win loses it. Call counsel the man Daniel trusted. Post a door rule by noon. Start a call, log date, time, exact words, no summaries. Voice passwords at the bank and utilities. Freeze credit with all 3 bureaus. Healthcare proxy updated primary and backup. No signatures outside a lawyer's office, ever. I wrote each item in the block letters I used to teach children to print slow enough that the letters stood upright on their own. When I finished, June pushed her index card across the table. Copy mine today. Make it yours. Put your name on it. Tape is louder than a speech. I took another small square of cornbread, more butter than bread now, and felt my ribs loosen. When fear speaks, it rushes. When dignity speaks, it uses bullet points. At 11:15, I dialed Arthur Keene, the attorney Daniel had called a boring gift. Good boars build strong fences, my husband liked to say. Arthur answered on the second ring, voice low and certain. I introduced myself, though I didn't need to. Elaine, he said, and I could hear the shuffle of papers on a desk, the weight of a hand that knows where the right file is. Daniel told me to expect you one day. Come at 1 if you can. At 11:30, I printed the door rule in thick marker on a clean card. No documents accepted at the door. Drafts 48 hours in advance. All matters through counsel A. Keene S. Kiki. I signed my name below it the way you sign a permission slip for a child. Clear, legible, nobody's guess. The tape made a crisp sound when it tore and another when it sealed the card to the jam. I tasted both sounds and found them good. At 12:40, June stood in my hallway, watching me put on the blue blazer I save for parent conferences and funerals. She looked at the door rule, then at me. Armor on, she said. Arthur's office occupies a narrow brick townhouse a block off the courthouse square. It smells faintly of lemon oil and paper that has earned its keep. The receptionist, a woman with reading glasses on a chain, took my name and handed me a pen with weight to it. Pens should have weight when they are used for defense. Arthur came to the waiting room himself. Sleeves already rolled tie, loosened just enough to make trust possible. He didn't ask for the story first. He asked for the folder. We sat at a wide oak table in a conference room whose window overlooked a crepe myrtle losing its blooms. He opened the file and read without noise, already nodding the way builders nod at studs and joists. Immediate effect, unlimited financial authority, health decisions layered in like an afterthought, he said almost to himself. No springing language, no oversight, no co-agent. And Mr. Porter prepared this. Yes, I said. He brought his own pen. Arthur closed the folder with a sound that wasn't loud but traveled. We are not signing this, he said. We are also not discussing it with them again. From now on, everything roots through me. He opened a drawer, took out a thin binder, and clicked a tab. Daniel was exacting, he said, and then because he is precise and not sentimental, he slid a checklist toward me. Immediate actions, trust and title maintenance. Re-record deeds at the county to refresh indexing with the trustee information on the front page. File statement of authority for the trust, so clerks see you before anyone else does. Place an attorney of record notice on the property accounts, and the bank no changes without written confirmation from this office. Freeze credit with Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. We'll do it on speakerphone so we have the reference codes. Add voice passwords to your primary accounts and tell your utilities the same. Update your advanced healthcare directive, primary proxy and secondary proxy you choose. Institute a bank rule, no transfers without you in person present with identification and a callback to a number only you know. Start a call log in this binder. Page numbers at the bottom. If someone ever asks, who said what, the log will answer instead of your memory. He paused. Is there a neighbor you trust? June Ellison, I said. Good, he said. Make her primary for healthcare decisions if you prefer. Your daughter can be secondary. You are protecting her from a role she cannot play if she's being pressured elsewhere. That's not exclusion, it's clarity. He pressed a button on the phone and introduced himself to a paralegal named Sophia Voice, quick and efficient. Forms began to arrive in the room like patient birds landing one by one, a deed form and affidavit, a proxy designation, a letter to the bank manager, 2 certified mail slip covers already clipped with green cards. Sophia brought in a notary journal and a stamp in a zippered pouch. Read every paragraph, Arthur said. Ask when you want a word changed. He handed me a pen with blue ink. Blue shows what we did today. Black looks like it always was. I read, we changed may to shall twice. We added my middle name where someone had once omitted it. When I signed, it wasn't flourish. It was a bridge between the person I remember being and the person I am now. Each time Sophia pressed the notary seal, there was a heavy little thud on the page, a sound that settled into the table and into my ribs. Not drama structure. We called the 3 credit bureaus on speaker, and I spelled my name for operators who moved through scripts like careful dancers. When they offered security questions, Arthur held up a hand. We prefer a voice password, he said. We will also need reference numbers by the end of the call. They read off strings of digits. Sophia wrote them on a sheet that she then slid into a plastic sleeve labeled Keep. She wrote Keep in caps because sometimes you need your own handwriting to talk back to fear. Arthur drafted a letter to the bank manager I have known longer than my knees have ached. It was polite and immovable. He requested the callback rule and the in-person signature requirement and asked that my file be coded attorney contact required. He slid the letter to me to sign. When I asked whether the manager would be offended, Arthur shook his head. He will thank you, he said. The bank prefers to be the lock, not the open door. We set a statement of authority for the trust listing me as trustee with full powers as Daniel had written and notarized years ago when our lives still contained picnics on unfinished decks. Arthur attached a copy of the trust's relevant pages so clerks would not have to guess. The simplest courtesy you can offer a bureaucracy, he said, is everything it needs at once. By 3:30, we had a stack of documents that looked like work and felt like breath. Arthur tucked them into a leather briefcase that had seen years and held shape anyway. He would walk them to the clerk's office himself, he said. They misplace less when I smile at them, he added, which I suspect is lawyer humor and also true. Before I left, he opened the binder to a fresh page, wrote call log at the top, and numbered the bottom corner. 1. Every time someone calls about the houses, the bank, the trust, or your person, he said, you write the date, the time, the name, and their exact words. Not what they meant, what they said. Exact words win when memories argue. On the sidewalk outside his office, the world felt ordinary again. Delivery trucks, a bicycle bell, the drift of barbecue smoke from the corner place that has fed courthouse clerks since 1978. I put the binder in my tote and walked to my car, slow enough to notice. Dignity isn't a march, it's a pace. At home, I set Arthur's binder on the kitchen table and pinned the first green certified mail receipts to the corkboard where a third-grade spelling list once lived. A thin parade of proof. The notary thuds were still in my ears, distant drums that didn't demand attention so much as provide it. June came by at 4 with coffee and a thermos and her carpenter's eye. She inspected the door rule like a building inspector approves a beam. Needs nothing, she said. But I brought tape in case you want the corners secured. People tug at rules when they don't like them. We sat with our cups and the quiet that honest work leaves behind. June asked for the facts, as if checking pulse and blood pressure who had called what they had said, whether anyone had tried a side door. I told her Arthur's to-do list and the voice password and the bank letter and the attorney of record notices he would file. You'll sleep, she said. Maybe not tonight, but you'll sleep. I thought peace meant not having to do any of this, I said. Peace, June said, means you did it before the storm. She stood and walked to the hallway where the safe sits scarred from its working years. She didn't touch it. She just regarded it with respect as one does a tool that keeps people alive when they use it right. Frank used to say, a roof isn't a promise, she said. It's a practice. You keep it sealed. Near dusk, I wrote my own door rule on a second card, the one I would keep in my pocket the way a person keeps a rosary or a list of names. No documents at the door. Drafts 48 hours in advance, through counsel. I added a fourth line, mine alone. I do not decide at the door. I decide at the table after tea. June nodded at that one. Thresholds make people hurry, she said. Tables make them sit. I cooked eggs and spinach for supper because simple protein feels like resolve. I washed the skillet and left it to dry the towel thin, at the edges from years of use. When I carried the cups to the sink, I felt the brass key knock lightly against my hip from the cardigan pocket where I keep it. I took it out and laid it beside Arthur's binder, let the metal rest where the paper worked side by side like two hands. The phone rang at 7:20. I let it go to voicemail. The second ring came with a text. "Can we drop by Friday with a notary?" "It's just formalities." Caleb had a knack for polishing verbs until they slid. I didn't answer. I wrote the time in his exact words in the call log on page 1. Then I opened a fresh index card and wrote my reply there, first to see it in the hard light of a small rectangle. "Please contact attorney Arthur Keene. All meetings and documents must go through him." I read it 3 times. No apology, no explanation. A sentence that is a wall you can put your hand on without getting a splinter. Then I typed it into the phone, checked the spelling, and pressed send. The message left with a soft whoosh, the sound a well-made drawer makes when it fits its slot. Night settled the street. Porch lights blinked on one by one until the block looked like a string of honest lanterns. I taped the call log instructions above the telephone because in a hurry, people forget what they promised themselves when they were calm. I brewed chamomile and set out 2 cups again. Habit remains a kind of prayer even when the congregation is memory. The second cup steamed beside the first, and I let it steam without the ache it used to bring. I carried my tea to the hallway and stood in front of the safe. Daniel's knuckles had scarred the paint years ago, carrying it from truck to kitchen. The scar looks like a check mark now. I pressed the brass key into the lock just enough to feel the catch. Not to open, only to remember I could. Back in the kitchen, I opened Arthur's binder to page 2 and wrote a short sentence at the top in the margin. "Quiet is not retreat. It is aim." Teachers write things in margins when they want a child to find them later. Sometimes we must be our own student. It was nearly 9 when June texted from her front room, doors locked. "Call me if you hear a car." Another cardinal virtue of widows, they pair their tenderness with surveillance. I slept in pieces that night, the kind of sleep that takes attendance after each hour, checking that the windows are latched and the papers where you left them. At 2, rain began soft at first, then the more confident kind. The house answered like a good ship timbers, making small adjustments and then settling back. Somewhere in the second hour of rain, I dreamed of saltwind houses braced against a summer squall, water striking roofs in long straight lines. In the dream, a single window glowed in each house, the kitchen window, and a woman stood at each one hand on a key, watching the rain and not afraid. Morning brought that tired clarity that follows work done right. I made oatmeal and put a spoonful of June's cornbread in a bowl and called it dessert. At 9, Sophia's email arrived with scanned copies, stamped deeds file numbers, and a note that the clerk had smiled when Arthur thanked her by name. "We'll have return receipts in 3 to 5 days," Sophia wrote. "They'll be green. You can pin them." I printed the scans and set them under a magnet shaped like a little lighthouse my students had given me one year when we studied beacons. I don't believe in coincidences when the object is shaped like the word you need. I spent an hour with the voice passwords bank, utilities insurance, choosing phrases that would never be said in casual conversation. I used the names of crayons from my old classroom, periwinkle, burnt sienna, raw umber, because they are true and odd at once. I wrote each on a list and then put the list in the safe, because a password written is a password multiplied unless you lock it down. At 11, a robin scolded something in my roses, and I stepped onto the porch to see only a cat walking with the offended innocence of animals who have been told the rules. I touched the door rule by the hinge, felt the tape edges, and pressed them flat again. The card did not need me. I needed the card. By noon, the light changed, August tilting toward a bright that is both invitation and warning, the kind of heat that makes arguments shorter and mistakes more certain. I wrote one more card and taped it inside the door where only I would see it. "You do not decide at the door. You decide at the table after tea. Repetition is not weakness. It's training." At 2, my daughter Nora texted, "Are you free to talk tonight?" Only that. No pleasantry. No argument inside it. I wrote the time and the words in the call log. I placed my hand on the binder not to steady it, but to steady myself. The hours between 2 and 7 were ordinary by design. Laundry, a page from a book I've been reading for 6 months because I allow sentences to take the time they want. A nap I did not fight. When the sun eased, I trimmed a rose that had flowered itself to exhaustion and whispered thanks. Yes, I talked to flowers. I also talked to paperwork. Both respond to tone. At 7, Nora called. I let the machine take the first ring and then answered on the second, because a person who has chosen her pace does not sprint. "Hi, Mom," she said. The sound in her throat told me she had practiced words she wasn't sure would hold. I thought maybe we could schedule a time to go over some things. "I'm free next Wednesday at 10, I said. "At Mr. Keene's office. He'll put a pot of coffee on. We can look at anything you'd like to bring." Silence. Then a breath. The word Wednesday is a boundary in calendar form. "Okay," she said. I can do that. She added nothing else, which is its own kind of relief. I wrote Wednesday 10 a.m. Nora in the call log with a small star, not for triumph, but to mark the first sentence in a language we might yet share. After the call, I set 2 cups on the table and brewed a pot, because rituals are not superstition when they keep a person human. I put Arthur's binder at the center of the table between the cups. Paper has a way of owning a middle the way children do when they spread homework and elbows. I don't mind. The middle is where learning happens. I stood in the hallway one more time and laid my palm against the safe. The metal gave back the cool of a thing that does its job by being exactly itself. Daniel once ran his hand across a beam and said, "If it stands, it matters." I am older now than I was when he said it, but the sentence fits the same. At 9, I turned the porch light on and left the front door a finger's width ajar so the night air could breathe the house without entering it. The door rule caught a little breeze and fluttered, then settled again, obedient to physics, not to anyone's will. On the corkboard, the first green card had not yet arrived, but the copies of the filed deeds shone a little under the lamp as if ink remembers the press that made it part of the record. I went to bed not afraid of the storm promised by Friday's text. Storms do what storms do. Roofs do what roofs do. And I had chosen to be a roof. I slept. 2 nights after I taped the door rule to the jamb, the gravel in my drive gave its little warning. Light swept over the roses and then cut. I let the bell ring twice and opened on the third, not wide, not warm, just enough for courtesy to pass without letting persuasion in. Caleb stood there in a pressed shirt with Nora at his shoulder, a composition that looked accidental and wasn't. He smiled, the kind you practice in a mirror. "We were in the neighborhood," he said. "Thought we might check on you." "I'm well," I answered. "We have Wednesday at 10 with Mr. Keene." "Of course," he said, as if the appointment were his idea. "But we can talk now, mother to child, no lawyers, family. The word family is a ladder people lay down when they want to climb your walls." I stepped back exactly 1 pace and pointed at the card by the hinge. Nora's eyes tracked the lines, and I saw the little wince. A teacher knows the pain of a rule bumping into a habit. "We can sit in the kitchen," I said with tea. "We will not touch paper." At the table, I poured 2 cups and set a third empty one beside them, because habit is an honest witness. Caleb spread his palm on the wood as if steadying it. "You've carried so much," he began. "Taxes, maintenance, the stress. Nora and I just want to lift some weight. The POA is a simple way to make sure nothing slips." I stirred my tea. The spoon tapped porcelain in a rhythm that kept my breath from speeding up. Nora's hand found mine for a moment, warm, familiar, pleading. "It really would make things easier, Mom." Easier for whom, I asked, not bitter, just precise. "For everyone," Caleb said quickly. "You could travel, join a club, leave the business side to us. I let the quiet do what it does when you let it be, fill the room with the size of the question." "We'll speak Wednesday," I said at last. "At Mr. Keene's office. If there are documents, he'll have copies ready." Caleb's smile thinned. Nora withdrew her hand. We exchanged ordinary goodnights in a voice none of us believed, and I closed the door with the small certainty of a latch finding its home. I wrote the visit in the call log, evening, both present. Pushed easier for everyone. Deferred to Wednesday. The next afternoon, I drove to the grocery on Meeting Street. The list in my pocket was ordinary on purpose: eggs, tea, a lemon. The kind of list that keeps a person from running toward trouble. I had just locked the car when I heard Caleb's voice 3 lanes over low and knife-edged for the first time. "I'm trying," he hissed into his phone. "If Elaine signs, we refinance 2 Saltwind places, sell 1, keep the others afloat. If she doesn't, we are done." He turned and paced the phone cupped against his ear. I stepped behind a cart corral where a shadow from an oak made a small room. "Mom, you're not listening," he said to whoever lived on the other end. "The bank won't extend us. Numbers don't work. Her trust is the runway." He stopped to pinch the bridge of his nose. "Don't say that. I can get her to sign. She's old school, respectful. We just need more pressure. Nora will help." The word pressure went through me like a nail through soft wood. I held the cold handle of the cart and let a gull cry cover the sound of my breath. I could have stepped out then, could have made him swallow his own words. Instead, I stayed in the shadow and let them belong to me in the way truth does when it finally loses its costume. He got in his truck, still talking, and drove off. The world resumed its errands, carts rattling, a child explaining very loudly what oranges are for, tires hissing on hot asphalt. I went in and bought the lemon on my list and nothing else, because a person should not grocery shop while holding a confession. At home, the kettle gave its small, faithful signal. I set 2 cups, added the third for honesty, and put the brass key on the table between them. "You were right, Daniel," I said to a man who once measured beams as if they could answer back. "Some storms are weather, some wear a tie." It was Nora at the door near dusk, alone, her makeup a little tired around the eyes. She gripped the back of the chair before she sat, the way a person holds a rail when the boat lists. "Why don't you trust me?" She began too fast. I'm trying to help you. Caleb is trying to help. You've always trusted me. I do trust you, I said, and meant it. I also know the difference between trust and signing. Her mouth trembled. You think we're trying to take everything. I think the paper they brought takes more than it gives. That's not fair, she said, and cheeks came up in the old way she has when she's 13 again. I heard him at the grocery, Nora, I said gently. He spoke to someone about numbers in a runway. He used the word pressure. He did not say care. Her eyes closed and the old child war loyalty versus knowledge passed across her face. You were spying, she said at last. I was buying lemons, I answered. I listened when the truth fell out. She stared at the cup she wasn't drinking. He's scared, she said finally. The company he thinks if he fails, it means he is small. He can't bear small. I will not make myself smaller to keep him from feeling small, I said. I will not mortgage what your father built to protect him from a mirror. We sat with that. She knotted the corner of a napkin and then unknotted it. Do you love me? She asked, absurd and necessary. Enough to tell you no, I said. Enough to be your mother instead of your bank. She laughed once, the kind that cuts. I hate that sentence, she said, and I know it's right. We made tea we did not drink. When she left, she hovered in the doorway, fingers on the frame. I'll come Wednesday, she said softly, with questions, not papers. After she was gone, I wrote to Daniel at the little desk by the window, where he once sketched roof lines on napkins when the dining table was full of pasta bowls. Dear Dee, the price of keeping the wall is that it casts a shadow. I will stand in it until the noon moves. I folded the letter and put it on top of the other unsent ones, a pile that feels less like grief and more like a ledger of choices. On Sunday after service, June tugged me toward the fellowship hall where coffee tastes like strength and powdered sugar floats in the air. She sat me with 3 women I'd nodded at for years, but never quite found the courage to claim May, who raised 3 boys who all think they are eldest. Lorna, who outlived 2 husbands and 1 brokerage account. And Patrice, who keeps a notebook the way some people keep a rosary. Set your cup down, May said. Your hands can't shake if they're useful. I told them what had been brought to my table, the folder, the visits, the grocery lot confession. They did not lean back. They leaned in. Desperation smells like cologne, Lorna said. It arrives with flowers and a notary. Write a sentence for your refrigerator, Patrice said, fishing a photocopy from her notebook. We call them house sentences. They keep the inside true when the outside gets loud. Her sheet headlines I recognized: freeze credit, voice passwords, no signatures at the door, call log, date, time, exact words. At the bottom she had written, you decide at the table after tea. May touched my sleeve. Saying no is how you keep being her mother, she said. Children can lean on a person. They slide off a doormat. June split a sugar cookie and put the bigger half on my napkin. You don't need us to make you brave, she said. You are already brave. We are here so the wind meets more bodies. I went home with 1 more card for the jam, this one for my side only. A boundary is a way to stay. I taped it where only I would see. On Wednesday morning, the appointment held. Nora came with a folder that had questions and not a single signature line. Arthur answered slowly, explained what a trust is designed to do, and what a POA without limits will undo, and he did not scold. You can love your husband and still refuse his plans, he told my daughter. Those are not opposites. Nora left with copies of deeds and the office Wi-Fi password scribbled on a post-it, because Sophia thinks about kindness in small ways. That evening, a text from Caleb arrived. Without grease around it, Friday the 3 p.m. We'll bring a notary. Simple. I wrote the words in the log, then sent the reply I had rehearsed on an index card. Please contact Attorney Keene. All meetings and documents must go through him. I put the phone face down and pressed my thumb into the brass key until the groove warmed. Friday came hot and windless, the kind of heat that makes tempers believe they are truth. At 3 sharp tires ground my gravel like a threat. The knock shook the door in its frame. I stood with my hand on the knob and let the first volley pass me like weather. Open up, Elaine. Caleb's voice plain now, stripped of the polish he wore to dinner. This is ridiculous. You're making everything harder than it needs to be. I answered at a normal volume as if he were across a table instead of beyond oak. As my message said, all matters through counsel. He hit the wood with the flat of his hand. You think a lawyer will save you? You don't know how any of this works. You'll drown in paperwork without us. You'll end up alone. I leaned my shoulder to the door, not to hold it, just to feel the line. I am not drowning, I said, and this conversation is over. The handle jerked once, twice the useless anger that comes when a plan meets a wall it didn't believe in. For a breath, I felt 30 and then 70 in the same second. All the years of teaching children to use their inside voice pressed into one sentence. I did not speak. No. The porch boards creaked. His steps retreated. A door slammed. The engine roared. I stayed with my forehead against the wood long enough to hear my own pulse step down from a run to a walk. Threshold is a gentle word for a hard truth. It is the place where you decide whether to be a gate or a hinge. I do not swing. I hold. When I finally moved, the room looked unchanged. The rug in its place, the binder open on the table, the 2 cups, and the honest third. Outside, the roses nodded as if wind had come, though the air was still. Maybe it was only relief arranging their petals. My phone buzzed on the counter. "We'll be back." I wrote that too in the log. Then I set a pot to boil and laid the brass key beside the stove so the light could find it. Keys prefer light. So do rules. So do people. I took my tea to the hallway and touched the safe. A roof isn't a promise, June had said. It's a practice. The house exhaled its old wood breath and stood. I stood with it. The line at the door is not offense against love. It is offense against harm so love can live. That night I slept. The week after the knocking, life arranged itself into small finished steps. Sophia emailed scanned copies of the re-recorded deeds with clerk stamps neat as a row of stitches. The subject line was plain filed and indexed, and that was exactly the comfort it offered. I printed the scans and slid them under the little lighthouse magnet on my corkboard where spelling lists used to live. By Thursday's mail, the first green return receipts arrived, cardboard proof that envelopes with my name had reached the right counters and hands. I pinned each card with a silver tack. The cork made that soft give it makes for something that has already been decided. At noon, Arthur called. 2 things, he said in the tone of a man sweeping a porch. First, your attorney of record notice is coded at the bank. No address changes, no beneficiary edits, no transfers without me and you in the room. Second, someone, likely your son-in-law, tried to update contact preferences on an account. The system refused and logged it. Did the bank mind the extra rules, I asked? They thanked us, he said. Locks sleep better than open doors. When we hung up, I put the brass key on the table beside Arthur's binder and let both sit in the same light. Paper and metal, 2 ways of remembering who owns what. Early evening brought a text from Nora. Can I stop by? Nothing else. I wiped my hands on a dish towel the way a person does before handling something fragile. When she turned up the walk, she carried a brown bag, lemons and ginger peeking from the top, as if she had borrowed my shopping list from a kinder day. We stood a moment at the gate, fingers touching the latch from opposite sides. The screen door behind me was propped ajar, my favorite compromise. Garden looks steady, she said. It holds, I answered. Storms come, roots remember. On the porch, we sat 1 step apart, the afternoon heat loosening its grip. She kept the bag on her lap like a shield that smelled of tea. I told Caleb, everything goes through Mr. Keene now, she said finally. He called me disloyal. He said you had poisoned me against him. My hand stayed folded in my lap. Did I? She managed half a smile. No. Your door rule did. She drew a breath that sounded like a sentence learning its shape. I'm not here to argue, I'm here to... She searched for a word and found the humble one. Apologize. I should not have brought a notary to your threshold wearing the word family like permission. We let the porch hum with its old wood quiet. Down the block, a screen door squeaked and then remembered how to close. I keep replaying the wedding in my head, she said. The table 14, the tall flowers, me pretending not to notice. I should have moved the arrangement myself. I survived it, I said. I wanted celebration that included you, she answered, and this time the truth did not accuse, it acknowledged. I stood to put the kettle on. She followed me to the kitchen table where 2 cups waited and a third empty one sat. The way honesty sits when you make room for it. I set the lemons and ginger on the board, the brass key beside them, metal cool against citrus warmth. I thought a signature was a shortcut, Nora said, as I sliced thin coins of ginger. A door to a better hallway, but doors without hinges fall. Boundaries are hinges, I said. They let things open and close without breaking. We drank what we made tea that tastes like being sensible. Nora glanced at the corkboard. The green cards were a small parade now, and beside them the clerk stamps shone slightly under the lamp. Justice by process, she said softly, testing the phrase like a new recipe. It is slower than shouting, I said, but it holds. She pressed her palm flat on the table. I'm not asking you to change your mind. I'm asking whether I can stand near it without feeling like I disappeared. You can, I said. It helps if we both name what the boundary is for not to keep love out, but to keep harm from entering disguised as help. Her eyes softened. I can live with that sentence on my refrigerator. We talked in ordinary specifics, Wednesday check-ins at Arthur's office when needed copies of anything she wanted to understand, a promise that no decisions would ever be asked for at a doorframe. She told me she would be staying with a friend for a while. I need a room without an argument in it, she said. I nodded. Sometimes love means not furnishing a room you're not invited to fix. When she left, she paused at the threshold. I never stopped loving you, she said. I know, I answered. Truth is not always new, sometimes it is a return. After the house settled, I pulled a small square of paper from the drawer and wrote 3 plain lines in my old classroom hand. I love my daughter. I will not sign. I am still here. The words looked almost childish, which is how most true things look before the world dresses them. I pinned the slip beside the photo of Daniel in his checkered work shirt sleeves rolled smile steady. The paper curled a little at the corner as if leaning toward him to hear the ocean in his pockets. Later came a message from Arthur, filed your healthcare proxy, June primary, Nora secondary, bank callback rule confirmed. The practical notes laid down their usual calm. I texted June a thank you, and she replied with her own liturgy deadbolt set. Call if gravel crunches. Night spread like water. I turned on the porch light and left the door again, a finger's width not closed against respect, not open to pressure. The door rule fluttered once and then behaved. In the kitchen, 2 cups steamed, and the empty third sat without ache. The house was not louder. I was simply more present inside it. Before bed, I touched the safe, the key, the binder, and the card on the jamb. 4 objects, 1 sentence. My life is not a document to be produced on demand. I lay down with the window cracked to the smell of salt. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked once and decided against a second opinion. Morning came with that clear light Charleston keeps for days that matter. I touched the note by Daniel's photo before I put the kettle on. Through the screen, I could hear the small talk of sparrows and the distant, unremarkable quiet of a world where paperwork had done its work. The fortress had never been a castle, it was a roof. It kept the weather out, so the room of love could breathe. I poured tea into 2 cups, then set the third across from me for what we are still mending. The steam rose like a promise made in plain words. I did not wait for a knock. I had already chosen my side of the line and discovered it was wide enough to stand together when respect learned the address. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.